This is the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Before we begin, I want to say a word about this recording because it is not the usual one. He wrote this book at the end of his life in a cave on Mount Iwato. He handed the manuscript to his student and died a few weeks later. By his own account, he had fought more than 60 duels in his life, and he never lost a single one of them. For centuries, this book had no English translation at all. What you are about to hear is a new English translation made for this channel from the original Japanese. It was not taken from anyone else's version. We kept it faithful and we kept it plain with no old-fashioned English in the way Musashi wrote in short, hard sentences, and we left them short and hard. There is one thing I want you to listen for. The fourth scroll is called the Book of Wind, and there he goes after every other school of the sword. He names them one by one and says why he thinks each of them is wrong. Tell me in the comments if you agree. The book begins now.
Preface. The Way of Strategy. I have named my school two heavens as one. For the first time, I am setting down in writing what I have built through years of training. It is early in the 10th month, in the year 1643. I have climbed Mount Iwato, in the land of Higo, on the island of Kyushu. I bow to heaven. I pay my respects to Kannon. I kneel before the Buddha. I am Shinmen Musashi, no Kami Fujiwara no Genshin, a warrior born in the province of Harima, and I am 60 years old. I set my heart on the way of strategy when I was young. I fought my first duel at 13. My opponent was a swordsman of the Shinto school, named Arima Kihei, and I beat him. At 16 I beat a swordsman of great strength named Akiyama, from the province of Tajima. At 21 I went up to the capital. I met the best swordsmen in the country. I fought them many times, and I never once failed to win. After that I traveled from province to province, and from town to town, meeting swordsmen of every school. I fought more than 60 times. I never once lost the advantage. All of this happened between the age of 13 and the age of 28 or 29. When I passed 30 and looked back at the road behind me, I saw something. I had not been winning because I had mastered strategy. Perhaps I was born with a gift for the way, and never strayed from the natural order of things. Or perhaps the other schools were simply weak. So I kept training, morning and evening, to reach a deeper understanding. The way of strategy came to me on its own when I was about 50 years old. Since then I have lived without needing to search for anything more. I apply the principles of strategy to every art and every skill, and in none of them do I have a teacher. In writing this book, I borrow no old phrases from Buddhist scripture or Confucian learning. I use nothing from the old war chronicles or the old manuals of tactics. I want to show what this school really sees and really believes, and my only mirrors are the way of heaven and Kannon. It is the night of the 10th day of the 10th month, in the dark hours before dawn, and I take up the brush and begin. The Book of Earth. Introduction. Strategy is the law of the warrior houses. A commander must practice this law above all, and the common soldier must know it too. Yet today, There is not one warrior in the world who truly understands the way of strategy. Look at the ways men follow. Buddhism is a way of helping people. Confucian learning corrects the way of letters. The physician follows a way of curing illness. The poet teaches the way of verse. There are tea masters and archers, and men of every other art and skill. Each of them trains at what he chooses and loves what suits his heart. Very few love the way of strategy. Start with the warrior. It is said that his are the two ways, the brush and the sword, and his way is to practice both. Even a man with no talent for it, it must work at the law of arms, as far as his own rank demands. If you measure what is usually in a warrior's mind, it seems he thinks the way is nothing more than being ready to die. But dying is not the warrior's alone. A monk, a woman, a farmer, and men lower still can all know their duty, feel shame, and face the death that has to come. In that there is no difference between them. The warrior follows the way of strategy by making excellence his foundation in everything. He wins when two men cross swords. He wins when many men fight. He builds his name and his position for his Lord and for himself. He does all of this through the power of strategy. There will also be men who think that learning the way of strategy is useless when the real moment arrives. To them I say this: train so that it is useful at any moment, and teach so that it is useful in all things. That is the true way of strategy. What the way of strategy means. In China and in Japan alike, a man who follows this way has always been called a master of strategy. No warrior can afford not to study it. Lately, there are men who call themselves strategists and make a living at it. But all they really have is ordinary swordsmanship. The shrine priests of Kashima and Kotori say their teaching comes from the gods, and they have founded schools and traveled the provinces, passing them on. All of that is recent. Among the 10 abilities and the 7 arts named in the old lists, strategy is counted as a useful art, and so it does belong among the arts. But once you call it useful, you cannot limit it to ordinary swordsmanship. If you stop at the narrow advantage of the sword, you will not even understand the sword, let alone the law of war. Look at the world. Men turn their arts into merchandise. They treat themselves as merchandise. They make their equipment to be sold. This is flour and fruit, and there is less fruit here than flour. In the way of strategy above all, men add color, force the flowers open, and show off their technique. They speak of this training hall and that training hall, and they teach the way and learn the way, hoping to profit by it. Someone once said that half learned strategy is the cause of serious wounds, and he was right. There are 4 ways that people live by: the warrior, the farmer, the craftsman, and the merchant. The first is the way of the farmer. The farmer gathers his tools and spends spring and autumn watching the turn of the seasons without rest. That is the way of the farmer. The second is the way of the merchant. The man who makes wine gets the tools he needs, judges good quality from bad, and lives on what that judgment earns him. Every merchant lives on what he earns and on the profit he makes. That is the way of the merchant. The third is the way of the warrior. The warrior makes his own weapons and understands the particular strength of each one. That is his way. A man of the military houses who takes no care of his weapons and never learns what each one is good for has a rather shallow sense of his own trade. The fourth is the way of the craftsman. The carpenter designs and builds every kind of tool, learns to use each of them well, keeps his plans true with the measuring line, and works without rest at his trade to make his living. Those are the 4 ways. I am going to explain strategy by comparing it to carpentry. I use the carpenter because of the word house. We speak of the noble houses, the military houses, the 4 branches of the Fujiwara. We speak of a house falling and a house continuing. We say this school, this style, this house. Since the word house is there, I have compared strategy to the carpenter's way. The word carpenter is written with characters that mean to plan on a large scale. Strategy is planning on a large scale. That is why I compare the two. If you want to learn the law of war, think about this book. Let the master be the needle and the pupil the thread, and train without stopping. Strategy compared to carpentry. The general is the master carpenter. He understands the measure of the country, corrects the measure of his province, and knows the measure of his own house. That is the way of the master. The master carpenter knows the proportions of temples and pagodas, understands the plans of palaces and towers, and puts men to work to raise buildings. The master carpenter and the master of a warrior house do the same work. When you build a house, you choose your timber. Wood that is straight, free of knots, and good to look at goes into the front pillars. Wood that has a few knots, but is straight and strong, goes into the pillars inside. Wood that is a little weak, but has no knots and looks well, goes into the thresholds, the lintels, the doors, and the sliding screens. Wood that has knots and is warped, if it is strong, can be examined and set where the house needs strength. Then the house will stand a long time without falling. Even among your timber, the pieces that are full of knots, warped and weak, can be used for scaffolding and burned for firewood later. Now, how the master puts his carpenters to work. He knows the good, the middling, and the poor. He gives one man the floors, another the doors and screens, another the thresholds, the lintels, and the ceilings. The clumsy ones he sets to laying joists, and the clumsiest to shaving wedges. If he judges his men and places them well, the work goes quickly and comes out well. Work goes quickly and comes out well when the master never lets his attention slip. He understands what real courage is. He knows the high, middle, and low spirit of his men. He knows how to raise their morale, and he knows the limit of what can be asked. All of this lives in the mind of the master. The principle of strategy is the same. The way of strategy for the soldier. The soldier is the carpenter. He sharpens his own tools with his own hands. He makes the working tools he needs and carries them in his box. He takes his orders from the master. He shapes the pillars and the beams with the adze, planes the floors and the shelves, cuts the openwork and the carving, keeps every measure true, and finishes even the corners and the edges cleanly. That is the carpenter's trade. Once a carpenter has learned his craft with his hands and knows his measures well, he becomes a master himself. It matters that a carpenter keeps sharp tools and sharpens them whenever he has a moment. With those tools he makes cabinets, bookshelves, desks, tables, lamp stands, chopping boards, and even pot lids, and he makes them skillfully. That is the heart of the carpenter's work. The soldier is the same. Study this carefully. The carpenter's care is this: that nothing warps, that the joints meet, that the plane cuts cleanly, that the surfaces are not scraped raw, and that nothing opens up as it dries. That is what matters. If you want to learn this way, put your heart into every single thing written here and study it well. Why this book is in 5 scrolls. I have divided the way into 5 parts and written 1 scroll for each, so that the advantage of each can be understood. They are earth, water, fire, wind, and void. The Book of Earth gives an outline of the way of strategy and the view of my own school. You cannot reach the true way through ordinary swordsmanship alone. You must know the large in order to know the small and go from the shallow to the deep, because it levels the ground of a straight road. I have named the first scroll Earth. Second, the Book of Water. Water is the model, and the mind becomes water. Water takes the shape of the vessel that holds it, square or round. It can be a single drop, and it can be the blue ocean. Water has the deep green color of a pool. I have taken what is clear in water and written my school into this scroll. If you can see clearly into the principles of the sword and beat a single enemy freely, then you can beat anyone in the world. The mind that beats one man is the same mind that beats 1,000 or 10,000. A general turns the small into the large. It is like building a great statue of the Buddha from a model a foot high. Things like this are hard to write out in detail. Knowing 10,000 things from one is the principle of strategy. I have written my school into the Book of Water. Third, the Book of Fire. This scroll is about fighting. Fire becomes large and becomes small, and it has a violent nature, so I have used it to write about battle. The way of battle is the same for one man against one man, as it is for 10,000 against 10,000. Make your mind large, then make your mind small, and examine it carefully. What is large is easy to see. What is small is hard to see. A large force cannot change direction quickly, while a single man changes fast because he changes with one mind. That is why the small is hard to follow. Study this well. The matters in the Book of Fire happen in an instant. So you must handle them daily until they feel ordinary and keep your mind unchanged. That is what matters in strategy. This is why I have written about fighting and winning in the Book of Fire. Fourth, the Book of Wind. I write this scroll as wind because it is not about my own school. It records the other schools of strategy in the world. Wind is used for the old style, the present style, and the style of this house or that. So this scroll sets out plainly what the other schools of the world actually do. That is wind. Without knowing others well, you cannot know yourself. In following any way, there is such a thing as a false path. If you work at your way every day, but your heart is turned away from it, you may believe you are on a good road. But seen from the straight road, it is not the true way. If you do not follow the true way to the end, a small bend in the mind will grow into a large one later. Look into this. The other schools are thought of as swordsmanship and nothing else, and it is easy to see why. But the principles and the techniques of my strategy are something else entirely. To show what the strategy of the world amounts to, I have written about the other schools in the Book of Wind. Fifth, the Book of Void. Once you call something void, where is the entrance and where is the depth? You take hold of the principle, and then let the principle go. You find freedom in the way of strategy of itself, and you gain your own power of itself. You meet the moment, you know its rhythm, you strike by yourself, and you hit by yourself. All of this is the way of the void. I have written down in the Book of Void how a man enters the true way without forcing it. Why this school is called Two Swords? I say two swords because a warrior, whether he commands or serves, wears two swords at his side. In the old days, they were called the long sword and the companion sword. Today, we call them the sword and the short sword. There is no need to explain at length that a warrior wears both. In this country, every warrior wears them, whether or not he understands why. To make the use of both clear, I call my school Two Swords as one. The spear and the halberd are counted as outside weapons, but they belong to the warrior's equipment all the same. In my school, the beginner learns by holding the long sword in one hand and the short sword in the other. That is the heart of it. When you are giving up your life, you want every weapon, you have to be doing work. To die with a weapon still in your belt, unused, cannot be what you intended. Even so, holding something in each hand makes it hard to use both freely. The point of the two swords is to teach you to handle the long sword in one hand. Large weapons like the spear and the halberd cannot be helped. But the sword and the short sword are both weapons for one hand. Holding the long sword in two hands is a problem on horseback. It is a problem when you are running. It is a problem in marshes, in muddy fields, on stony ground, on a steep road, and in a crowd. If you carry a bow or a spear in your left hand, or anything else at all. You have to use the sword one-handed. So taking the sword in both hands is not the true way. If you cannot bring a man down with one hand, then finish him with two. It costs you nothing. The first purpose of the two swords is to teach the hand to swing the sword alone. Everyone finds the sword heavy and hard to swing at first, but everything is hard at first. The bow is hard to draw. The halberd is hard to swing. You get used to each weapon in turn. The bow becomes easy as you grow stronger. And once you are used to swinging the sword, you gain the power of the way, and it swings well. The way of the sword is not about swinging fast. You will understand that in the second scroll, the Book of Water, the long sword is swung in an open space, the short sword in a narrow one. That is the first principle. In my school you win with the long weapon, and you win with the short one. So I do not fix the length of the sword. To find the way to win with anything at all is the way of my school. There are times when two swords are better than one, when a single man fights a crowd, or when a man has barricaded himself in somewhere. I will not write about all of that here. Know 10,000 things from one. Once you can practice the way of strategy, there is nothing you cannot see. Study this well. The meaning behind the word strategy. In this way, a man who can handle a sword is called a strategist by the world. In the martial arts, a man who shoots well is called an archer, and a man who has mastered the gun is called a gunner. A man who handles the spear is called a spearman, and a man who has learned the halberd is called a halberdier. By the same logic, a man who has learned the way of the sword should be called a swordsman or a short sword man. The bow, the gun, the spear, and the halberd are all weapons of the warrior houses, so all of them belong to the way of strategy. Even so, there is a reason we take the word strategy from the sword in particular. It is by the power of the sword that a ruler governs the world, and a man governs himself. So the sword is where strategy begins. Once you have the power of the sword, one man can beat 10. If one man can beat 10, then 100 can beat 1,000, and 1,000 can beat 10,000. In my school, one man and 10,000 men are the same thing. And the whole law of the warrior, without exception, is what I call strategy. There are other ways the scholar, the priest, the tea master, the teacher of manners, the dancer. None of these belong to the warrior's way. But even if they are outside it, if you know the ways broadly, you will meet them somewhere. Whatever a man is, it matters that he polishes his own way well, knowing the advantage of each weapon. If you understand what each weapon is good for, then any of them will have its moment, depending on the occasion. The short sword has the advantage in a cramped room, and when you are close against your enemy. The long sword serves reasonably well anywhere. On the battlefield, the halberd is weaker than the spear. The spear takes the initiative, and the halberd answers. Between two men of equal skill, the spearman is a little stronger. The spear and the halberd both lose their advantage in a tight space, and neither is any use against a man barricaded inside a building. They are weapons for the field. On the battlefield, they matter a great deal. But if you learn them indoors and fuss over small details, you will forget the true way, and you will miss the moment when they are needed. The bow is good for maneuvering in battle, and it can be drawn and loosed quickly alongside the spear or any other weapon, so it is especially good in open country. It is weak in a siege, and weak once the enemy is more than 20 ken away, which is about 40 paces. In our time, the bow is not the only art with many flowers and little fruit. Arts like that fail you when it matters. The gun has many advantages. Inside a fortress, nothing beats it. Even in open country, it has the advantage before the fighting starts. Once battle is joined, it falls short. One virtue of the bow is that you can see the arrow fly. The weakness of the gun is that you cannot see the ball. Think this over carefully. As for the horse, it must be strong, it must respond, and it must have no bad habits. In general, a warrior's horse should walk well. His sword and short sword should cut well. His spear and halberd should pierce well. And his bow and gun should be strong and not break. You should not have favorites among your weapons. Too much of one thing is the same as not enough. Do not copy other men. Carry the weapons that suit your own body and your own hand. For a commander and a soldier alike, having likes and dislikes is a bad thing. Give this some thought. On the rhythm of strategy. Everything has rhythm, but the rhythm of strategy in particular cannot be reached without training. The rhythms you can see in the world are things like dance and the music of players and singers. All of those are steady rhythms that fall into place. Across the martial arts, there is rhythm and timing in shooting a bow, firing a gun, and even riding a horse. In every art and every skill, rhythm must not be broken. There is rhythm even in things you cannot see. In the life of a warrior, there is the rhythm of rising in service and the rhythm of falling. The rhythm that fits and the rhythm that does not. In trade there is the rhythm of becoming rich and the rhythm by which a rich man loses everything. Every way has its own differences of rhythm. There is a rhythm of flourishing and a rhythm of declining. Learn to tell them apart. In strategy, the rhythms are many. First, know the rhythm that matches, then understand the rhythm that clashes. Among the large and small rhythms, and the slow and the fast, know the rhythm of the strike, know the rhythm of the interval, and know the rhythm that goes against. This last one is the heart of strategy, and without it your strategy will never be certain. You win a fight by reading the rhythm of each enemy, by using a rhythm he does not expect, and by bringing out the formless rhythm that is born from wisdom. Every scroll here deals mainly with rhythm. Study what is written and train hard. If you practice the way of my school, morning after morning and evening after evening, your mind will widen on its own. This is the strategy of the many and the strategy of the one, and I am setting it down in writing for the first time as earth, water, fire, wind, and void. These are the 5 scrolls. Anyone who wants to learn my strategy should follow these rules. First, think of nothing crooked. Second, train in the way. Third, touch on all the arts. Fourth, learn the ways of all trades. Fifth, understand the loss and the gain in everything. Sixth, learn to judge things accurately. Seventh, come to know what cannot be seen. Eighth, pay attention to the smallest thing. Ninth, do nothing that is useless. Keep these principles in mind and train in the way of strategy. In this way, above all, if you cannot look broadly at what is straight, you will not become a master of strategy. Once you have learned this law, you will not lose to 20 or 30 enemies alone. Keep strategy in your mind at all times and hold to the straight road. You will beat other men with your hands. Your eye will beat them too. Train until your whole body moves freely, and you will beat them with your body. Grow used to this way, and you will beat them with your mind as well. When you have come this far, how could any man defeat you? In strategy on the large scale, you win by having good men, by handling numbers well, by governing yourself rightly, by ruling the province, by feeding the people, and by keeping the customs and the laws of the world. In every way, to know how not to lose, and by that to save yourself and save your name, is the way of strategy. The Book of Water. Introduction. The spirit of my school, 2 heavens as one, takes water as its model and puts into practice the methods that bring advantage. That is why I set out the sword technique of my school in this scroll, the Book of Water. None of this can be written down in fine detail exactly as I hold it in my mind. Even where the words fall short, the meaning should come through on its own. Think over everything written here, word by word and letter by letter. If you read it loosely, you will go wrong in many places. Although the principles of strategy are written here as a contest between one man and one man, you must understand them as the principles of a battle between 10,000 and 10,000, and see them on that scale. That is what matters. In this way, above all, if you mistake the road even slightly, or wander off it, you will fall into bad ground. You will not master the way of strategy by reading this book alone. Take what is written here into yourself. Do not read it as something to be read, or learn it as something to be learned, or treat it as borrowed goods. Make it a principle you have found in your own heart. Put yourself into it, and work at it constantly. At the state of mind in strategy. In the way of strategy, your state of mind must be no different from your everyday mind. In daily life and in strategy alike, let your mind be broad and straight, held with no strain and no slack. Keep it centered so that it does not lean, and let it sway gently, so that even for an instant the swaying never stops. Examine this well. When you are still, your mind is not still. When you move fast, your mind does not hurry. The mind does not follow the body, and the body does not follow the mind. Guard your mind, and do not guard your body. Let nothing be missing from your mind, and let it not go astray. Let the surface of the mind be soft, and the depth of it strong, and do not let other men rate it. A small man must know in his mind what it is to be large, and a large man must know what it is to be small. Whether you are large or small, keep the mind straight, and do not let it favor your own convenience. That is what matters. Keep the inside of your mind clear and open, and place your judgment in that open space. Polishing your judgment and your mind is the whole work. Sharpen your judgment. Learn to tell right from wrong in the world. Know good from bad in everything. Try the different arts and the different ways for yourself. When no one in the world can deceive you anymore, your mind has become the mind of strategy. The mind of strategy is different from other things, in one way above all. Even when the battlefield is at its most hurried, drive to the bottom of the principles of strategy and hold to a mind that cannot be moved. Examine this well, the posture of the body in strategy. Hold your face so that it is not lowered and not raised, not tilted and not twisted. Do not put strain into your eyes. Do not let your forehead wrinkle, but draw the brows slightly together. Keep the eyes from moving about and hold them from blinking. Narrow them a little so that the face looks calm. Keep the line of the nose straight and push the jaw forward slightly. Keep the back of the neck straight and put strength into the nape. From the shoulders down, feel the whole body as one balanced piece. Drop both shoulders. Straighten the spine. Do not push the backside out. Put strength from the knees to the toes and set the belly forward, so the waist does not bend. There is a teaching called tightening the wedge. It means resting your belly against the scabbard of your short sword so that the belt never goes slack. In everything to do with the body and strategy, make your everyday body your fighting body, and your fighting body your everyday body. That is what matters. Examine it well, the gaze in strategy. Look widely and broadly. There are two kinds of seeing: perceiving and looking. Perceiving is strong and looking is weak. See what is far away as if it were close, and what is close as if it were far. That is the heart of strategy. To know the enemy's sword without looking at his sword at all is the great thing in strategy. Give it some thought. This gaze is the same whether you fight alone or command an army. Keep the eyes still and take in both sides of you. That is what matters. You will not manage this suddenly when the moment is on you. Learn what is written here. Live in this gaze every day, and do not let it change whatever happens. Examine it well. How to hold the sword. Hold the sword with the thumb and forefinger floating a little. The The middle finger is neither tight nor loose, and the ring finger and the little finger grip. Slack inside the hand is bad. Take up the sword, thinking that you are going to cut the enemy down. When you cut him, the hand does not change, and the hand does not freeze. If you have to beat the enemy's sword aside, or take it, or strike it, or hold it down, change only the thumb and the forefinger a little. Whatever happens, take up the sword thinking that you will cut. The hand that cuts a practice target and the hand that cuts in a real fight are the same hand. In both, you are cutting a man, and nothing in the hand changes. In the sword and in the hand alike, avoid what I call becoming fixed. Fixed is a dead hand. Not fixed is a living hand. Learn this well. Footwork. On moving the feet, let the toes float a little and press down strongly through the heel. Depending on the moment, your step may be long or short, slow or fast, but it is always the ordinary walk. Among the ways men use the feet, there are the jumping foot, the floating foot, and the stamping foot. I dislike all three. There is a teaching in this way called yin and yang footwork. It means never moving one foot alone. When you cut, when you withdraw, and even when you take a blow, you step right, left, right, left. Never step with one foot only. Examine this well. The 5 stances. The 5 stances are the upper, the middle, the lower, the stance on the right side, and the stance on the left side. Those are the 5. I divide the stances into 5, but all of them exist to cut a man down. There are no stances but these. Whichever one you take, do not think of it as taking a stance. Think of it as cutting. Make your stance large or small as the moment requires. The upper, the middle, and the lower are the substance of the stance. The 2 side stances are its application. You use the right, and the left where there is something above you, or where one side is closed in. Which one you use depends on the ground. There is a teaching in this way, understand, that the middle stance is the heart of it. The middle stance is what a stance really is. Look at strategy on a larger scale. The middle stance is the seat of the general, and the other 4 stances follow the general. Examine this well. The path of the sword. On knowing the path of the sword, when you swing the sword you carry every day, you can swing it freely with 2 fingers, once you know its path well. If you try to swing fast, you go against the path of the sword, and it becomes hard to swing. Swing it calmly at the speed it swings well. If you try to swing it fast, as though you were using a fan or a small knife, you leave the path of the sword, and you cannot swing it. That is what I call chopping with a little blade, and you cannot cut a man down that way. When you have struck downward, bring the sword up along the path where it rises easily. When you have swung sideways, bring it back sideways along the same good path, but extend the elbow as far as you can and swing strongly. That is the path of the sword. Once you have learned to use the 5 forms of my school, the path of the sword settles and the sword swings well. Train hard at this. The 5 forms the first. The first stance is the middle. Point the tip of your sword at the enemy's face. When you meet him and he strikes at you, turn your sword to the right and ride his blade aside. When he strikes again, turn the point back and strike, and leave your sword where it falls. When he strikes a third time, come up from below and hit his hands. That is the first form. Simply writing these 5 forms down will not make them clear. You have to take the sword in your hands and practice the path of the sword in each of the 5. With these 5 lines of the sword, you learn the path of your own sword. And you learn to read whatever sword the enemy uses. This is why I teach that there are no more than 5 stances for the 2 swords. Train at them. The 5 forms, the second. The second sword. Take the upper stance and strike the enemy at the very moment he strikes at you. If your blade misses him, leave it where it falls, and when he strikes again, scoop upward from below. A further strike is the same again. Within this form, there are many states of mind and many rhythms. If you train in my school through this form, you will come to know the 5 paths of the sword in detail, and you will win in any way you like. Practice it. The 5 forms, the third stance. Hold the lower stance, with the sword hanging down, and when the enemy strikes at you, come up from below and hit his hands. As you hit his hands, he will try to knock your sword down, and as he does, take the rhythm to slip past him and cut across his upper arms after his blow has passed. From the lower stance, you stop the enemy's attack with a single strike. The lower stance is useful when you carry the sword, whether the moment is fast or slow. Take the sword in your hands and train. The 5 forms, the fourth stance. Hold the sword sideways on your left, and when the enemy strikes at you, hit his hands from below. As you do, he will try to knock your sword down. Keep the feeling of hitting his hands, hold the path of your sword, and cut diagonally up past your own shoulder. That is the path of the sword. This is also the way to win when the enemy strikes again. You take the path of the sword. Examine it well. The 5 forms the fifth of the forms. Hold the sword sideways on your right. Read the way the enemy comes at you. Change the line from below your own sword. Raise it into the upper stance and cut straight down. This too is for learning the path of the sword well. If you get used to swinging in this form, you will be able to swing even a heavy sword freely. I will not write out these 5 forms in detail. You learn 1 full round of my school's sword through them. You learn most of the rhythms, and you learn to read the enemy's sword. Above all, you keep working your hands at these 5 without rest. Even in the middle of a fight, you work these lines of the sword. You read the enemy's mind, and you win in any way you like through the various rhythms. Think this through carefully. Stance and no stance. To speak of stance and no stance means that taking a stance with the sword is not really a thing at all. Yet, since you do place the sword in the 5 positions, you can call them stances. Where you put the sword depends on what the enemy does on the ground and on how the fight is running. Wherever you place it, hold it so that it is easy to cut that enemy down. The upper stance drops a little with the moment and becomes the middle. The middle rises a little to gain the advantage and becomes the upper. The lower rises a little as the occasion demands and becomes the middle. Either of the side stances moves a little towards the center and becomes the middle or the lower. This is why the principle is that there is a stance and there is no stance. Above all, once you have taken up the sword, your mind is on cutting the enemy down whatever happens. If you take the enemy's cut on your blade, or beat it aside, or strike it, or stick to it, or touch it, understand that all of these are only openings for cutting him down. If you think take it, or beat it aside, or strike it, or stick to it, or touch it, your cut will fall short. Think of everything as an opening to cut. Examine this well. In strategy on the large scale, the way you draw up your men is also a stance. All of it is an opening to win the battle. Becoming fixed is bad. Give this some thought. Striking the enemy in one beat. There is a rhythm for striking the enemy called the single beat. You find the distance where you and the enemy can reach each other. And you read the moment before he has settled himself. Then, without moving your body and without letting your intention show, you strike as fast and as straight as you can. You strike before the thought of pulling back, of slipping aside, or of striking has even begun to rise in him. That is the single beat. Learn this rhythm well, and train at striking quickly in the interval. The second beat. When you go to strike, the enemy may pull back quickly. Beat your sword aside or slip away. You show him a strike. Then you strike into the slack after he has beaten your blade, or into the slack after he has pulled back. That is the strike in the interval. You will not learn to do this from the written page alone. Once it has been shown to you, you will understand it at once. Striking without thought and without form. When the enemy is about to strike, and you are about to strike, let the body become a striking body, and the mind a striking mind. The hands come from nowhere, out of the void, and strike hard and fast as they fall. That is what I call no thought and no form, and it is the great strike. This strike will serve you again and again. Learn it well and train at it. The flowing water strike. The flowing water strike is used when you have closed with the enemy and you are pressing against each other, and he tries to pull back quickly, slip aside quickly, or beat your sword away quickly. Let your body and your mind grow large, and bring the sword from behind your body as slowly and as heavily as you can, with a sense of water hanging still, and strike large and strong. Once you have learned this strike, it is a reliable one. Reading the enemy's position is what matters. The linked strike. When you strike out, and the enemy tries to stop your blade or beat it away, you strike his head and his legs and anything else, all in the single motion, along one path of the sword. That is the linked strike. Practice this strike well, and it will serve you at any moment. Cross swords often, and work out for yourself how it goes. The spark strike. The spark strike is used at the distance where your sword and the enemy's sword are touching. You strike as hard as you can without raising your sword even slightly. The legs are strong, the body is strong, and the hands are strong, and you strike fast with all three. You will not manage this strike unless you practice it again and again. Train at it well, and it lands hard. The autumn leaves strike. The autumn leaves strike is the way to knock the enemy's sword down and take it out of his hands. The enemy holds his sword in front of you, thinking of striking, of beating your blade aside, of taking your cut. You strike his sword hard with no thought and no form, or with the spark strike, and then let your point drop and stick to his blade as it goes. His sword will fall every time. Train at this strike, and knocking the sword down becomes easy. Practice it well. The body in place of the sword. You could also call this the sword in place of the body. As a rule, when you strike, the body and the sword do not strike at the same time. Depending on how the enemy comes, the body moves into the strike first, and the sword strikes without regard to the body. Sometimes the body stays still, and only the sword strikes, but usually the body goes first, and the sword follows. Examine this well and practice striking this way. Striking and touching. Striking and touching are two different things. Striking, whatever form it takes, means striking with intent and with certainty. Touching means running into something. Even if you touch the enemy so hard that he dies on the spot, it is still touching. Striking means striking knowingly. Examine this. When you touch the enemy's hand or his leg, you touch first, so that you can strike hard afterwards. Touching is close to brushing against him. Learn this well, and you will see that the two are entirely different. Give it some thought. The body of the short, armed monkey. The body of the short, armed monkey means not putting the hands out. When you move in on the enemy, do not have any thought of putting your hands out. Get your body in before he strikes. If you think about reaching with your hands, your body is bound to hang back. Move your whole body in quickly. When you are close enough that your hands could meet, the body goes in easily. Examine this well. The body of lacquer and glue. Lacquer and glue means going in and sticking so that you cannot be separated. When you go in on the enemy, put your head against him, put your body against him, put your legs against him, and stick hard. Men tend to get the face and the legs in quickly while the body hangs back. Put your body right against his so that there is not the smallest gap between you. Examine this well. Comparing height. Comparing height means this. Whenever you go in on the enemy, do not let your body shrink. Stretch the legs, stretch the hips, stretch the neck, and go in strong. Put your face alongside his face, compare your height with his, and go in high. As though you were winning the comparison. That is the heart of it. Give this some thought. Sticking. When the enemy strikes and you strike, and he takes your blade, go in with the feeling of sticking your sword to his. Sticking means going in so that the swords are hard to separate and not too hard. When you put your sword against his and stick to it as you go in, you can go in as quietly as you like. There is sticking and there is tangling. Sticking is strong. Tangling is weak. Learn the difference. The body strike. The body strike means going in close to the enemy and hitting him with your body. Turn your face slightly aside, put your left shoulder out, and hit his chest. Make your body as hard as you can and hit him with the rhythm of two men colliding, going in with a bouncing spirit. Learn to go in like this. And once you have it in your body, you can knock the enemy back 2 or 3 ken, which is 4 or 5 paces. You can hit him hard enough that he dies. Train at this well. The 3 parries. There are 3 ways to take the enemy's blade. When you go in and he strikes, thrust your sword towards his eyes and let his blade run off, past your right shoulder. The second is the stabbing parry. As he strikes, thrust at his right eye, as though you were trapping his neck, and take his blade that way. The third is for when he strikes, and you go in with the short sword. Pay little attention to the blade you are taking, and go in punching at his face with your left hand. Those are the 3 parries. And close your left hand and think of driving your fist into his face. Train at this well. Stabbing at the face. Stabbing at the face means this. When you and the enemy are evenly matched, keep the intention of thrusting the point of your sword at his face in every gap between his blade and yours. That is the heart of it. If the intention of stabbing his face is there, his face and his body will pull back. Once you can make the enemy pull back, there are all kinds of ways to win. In the middle of a fight, the moment the enemy's spirit pulls his body back, you have already won. So never forget stabbing at the face. Train at this advantage while you practice strategy. Stabbing at the heart. Stabbing at the heart is for when you are fighting somewhere closed in above and closed in at the sides, where cutting is difficult and you have to thrust at the enemy. To turn his blade aside, show him the back of your sword held straight on, pull the sword back so the point does not waver, and thrust at his chest. This is above all a technique for when you are exhausted or when your blade will no longer cut. Think this through carefully. The 2 shouts. The 2 shouts are used when you strike and drive the enemy back, and he looks like striking in return. You thrust up at him from below, and then strike on the return. Both come with a fast rhythm. you thrust up with the first shout and strike with the second. This rhythm will serve you constantly whenever swords are crossing. To do it, raise the point as if you were about to run him through, and strike at the same moment you raise it. Practice the rhythm and examine it well. The slapping parry. The slapping parry is for when you and the enemy are trading blows, and the fight has fallen into a tapping rhythm. You meet his strike by slapping your sword against his and striking. Slapping does not mean hitting his blade hard, and it does not mean taking the blow. You meet his blade as he strikes, and strike him faster than you slapped. What matters is that the slap takes the initiative, and the strike takes the initiative. If the rhythm of the slap fits, no matter how hard the enemy strikes, your point will not drop as long as there is a little of the slap in it. Learn this well and examine it. Fighting many enemies. Fighting many enemies is for when you are alone against a crowd. Draw both your swords and hold them out wide to the left and the right, as though you were throwing the blades out sideways. Even when they come at you from all four sides, you drive them round to one side. Read the way they are coming, and who is in front, and who is behind. Meet the first man quickly. Keep your eyes on the whole field. Read where each of them will strike. And swing both swords across each other at the same moment. Cut the man in front with the outgoing sword, and cut the man moving in at your side with the returning sword. Waiting with the swords crossed is bad. Get quickly into the stance with a sword on each side. Cut hard into the first man who comes out. Break him down, and go straight at the next man who shows himself. Somehow drive them into a line, as though you were stringing fish. When you see them bunched together, go straight in hard along the line, without letting the gap open. If you only chase them round once they are close, you make no progress. If you keep thinking he will come from here, and now from there, you fall into waiting, and again you make no progress. You win by reading the rhythm and knowing where they will break. Gather a number of training partners now, and then get used to driving them together. And once you have the feel of it, one enemy or 10 or 20 are all the same to you. Practice well and examine it. The advantage in an exchange of blows. This means understanding where the advantage lies when swords are exchanged. I will not write it out in detail. Practice well and learn where the victory is. This is the sword that shows the true way of strategy. It is passed on by word of mouth. The single strike. This means winning with certainty through the spirit of a single strike. You cannot understand it without studying strategy properly. Train at it well and strategy becomes yours, and you win as you please. Practice it. Direct transmission. The spirit of direct transmission is how the true way of the two swords school is received and handed on. Train hard and put yourself into this strategy. That is what matters. It is passed on by word of mouth. Afterward. What I have written here is most of my school's swordsmanship, set down in this scroll. To learn how to take up the sword and beat men in strategy, first learn the 5 stances through the 5 forms. Learn the path of the sword, and let the whole body come free. The mind begins to work well. You come to know the rhythm of the way. The sword grows sharp in your hand of its own accord, and body and legs loosen as your mind directs them. In time you beat one man, then 2, and you come to know good strategy from bad. Practice what is in this book point by point. Fight your enemies. And little by little you take hold of the principle of the way. Keep it in mind always. Never hurry. Put your hand to it, whenever the chance comes, and learn what each thing is worth. Cross swords with any man and learn what is in his mind. A road of 1,000 miles is walked 1 step at a time. Hold your mind at ease. Understand that following this law is the duty of a warrior. Think today, I beat the man I was yesterday. Tomorrow, I beat a lesser man. And later, I beat a better one. Follow this book and let your mind stray nowhere off the road. Even if you beat any number of enemies, if you have gone against what you were taught, you are not on the true way. Once this principle is alive in your mind, you will see how one man can beat several dozen. Then, with the knowledge of the sword, you can master strategy both for the army and for the single man. 1,000 days of practice is called forging. 10,000 days of practice is called tempering. Examine this well. The Book of Fire. Introduction. In my school of the 2 swords, I see fighting as fire, and I set down winning and losing in battle in this scroll, the Book of Fire. To begin with, people everywhere think of strategy as something small. Some of them learn to use the wrist over 5 inches or 3 inches. Some take up a fan and learn to win from the elbow forward. Some learn a small advantage in speed with a practice sword, training the hands and training the feet, and make a slight quickness their whole concern. In my strategy, you stake your life in fight after fight. You learn to tell life from death. You learn the path of the sword. You learn to judge the force of the enemy's blade. You understand the edge and the back of the sword, and you train yourself to strike a man down. Small things and weak things never enter into it. When you are covered head to foot in your 6 pieces of armor, how could you think about anything small? So, in a fight where your life is at stake, 1 man against 5 or 10, knowing for certain how to win is what my strategy is. There is no difference between 1 man beating 10 and 1,000 men beating 10,000. Examine this well. You cannot gather 1,000 or 10,000 men to practice with every day. Still, you can take up your sword alone, weigh the mind of each enemy, learn his strengths and his weaknesses, and how his hands work. And through the wisdom of strategy, come to know how to beat 10,000 men. That is how you become a master of this way. Who else in the world will reach the direct road of my strategy? Who else will follow it to the end. Fix that in your mind. Train morning and evening and polish it. Then you find freedom on your own. You gain your own power on its own, and strange and wonderful things follow. That is the living spirit of a warrior who practices the law of war. Choosing the ground. When you judge where to stand, there is what I call taking the sun on your back. You stand with the sun behind you. If the ground makes that impossible, keep the sun on your right. Indoors, it is the same with the lamp. Keep it behind you or on your right. You want space behind you rather than a wall. So open up the ground on your left and keep the ground on your right close. At night, wherever you can see the enemy, keep the fire behind you and the light on your right, exactly as before. There is a saying, "Look down on the enemy," which means standing on ground even slightly higher. Indoors, treat the head of the room as the high ground. Once the fight begins and you are driving the enemy, drive him towards your left and put the bad footing behind him. Whatever the ground, forcing him back into difficult ground is what matters. On bad ground, you do not let the enemy look around. Give him no chance to turn his head, and press him without a pause. Indoors, it is the same. Drive him back against the threshold, the lintel, the door, a screen, the veranda, or a pillar, and again do not let him see the ground. Whichever way you drive him where the footing is bad or where something is in his way. Make the ground itself do the work and win by the ground. Study this and train at it. The 3 initiatives. There are 3 ways of taking the initiative. The first is when you attack the enemy. That is the initiative of attack. The second is when the enemy attacks you. That is the initiative of waiting. The third is when you and the enemy attack together. That is the initiative of 2 men at once. Those are the 3. There is nothing else at the beginning of any fight. Since you win by how you take the initiative is the first thing in strategy. There are many fine points here, but each moment has its own principle, and you win by reading the enemy's mind and using the wisdom of your strategy. So I will not write out every detail. First, the initiative of attack. You keep still, then attack suddenly and fast. Or you make the surface of yourself strong and fast while you hold something back underneath. Or you make your spirit as strong as you can. Quicken your feet a little more than usual and press him hard the moment you are beside him. Or you let your mind go free and mean to crush him from beginning to end, winning with a spirit that is strong all the way down. All of these are the initiative of attack. Second, the initiative of waiting. When the enemy comes at you, pay him no attention and look weak. As he gets close, break away hard, and then look as though you were leaping in. When you see him slacken, take him at once with everything you have. That is one way. Or, when he comes at you, come out even stronger. Catch the moment when the rhythm of his attack changes, and take the victory there. That is the principle of the initiative of waiting. Third, the initiative of two men at once. When the enemy comes fast, you come quietly and strongly. And as he gets close, set yourself as though you had made up your mind. The moment you see any looseness in him, take him hard. When the enemy comes quietly, let your body float up a little, come slightly faster, close with him, press against him once, and then take him hard according to how he is. This is hard to explain in words. Work it out from what is written here. You cannot always take the initiative, since it depends on the moment and on the principle at work. Still, all things being equal, you would rather attack first and have the enemy dancing to you. In every case, the initiative means winning for certain through the intelligence of your strategy. Train hard at it. Holding down the pillow. Holding down the pillow means not letting the enemy raise his head. In a contest of strategy, it is bad to be pushed around by another man and to be always following. You want to move the enemy around freely. Of course, the enemy wants the same, and so do you. And if you spend your time receiving and dodging what he does, you will never manage it. So in strategy, you stop his blow before it lands, you press down his thrust, and you break his grip when he closes. Holding down the pillow means this: once you have the true way of my school, and you are facing an enemy, you read whatever he is about to do before he does it. When he means to strike, you press down the first letter of the word strike and never let him reach the rest. That is what holding down the pillow means. You press the first letter of attack when he means to attack, the first letter of jump when he means to jump, the first letter of cut when he means to cut. It is always the same. Whatever the enemy tries against you, let him have the things that do him no good and hold down the things that would. That is the heart of strategy. But if you are only trying to hold him down and thinking hold him down, you are already following. First, go about your own work along the way, and while you do, press down the beginning of everything he means to try. Make all of it useless, and break him. That is the master of strategy, and it comes from training. Examine holding down the pillow well. Crossing the ford. Crossing the ford means this: when you cross the sea, there are narrows with hard currents, and there are long crossings of 40 or 50 ri, which is more than 100 miles. Those places are the fords. In going through the world, a man will meet many crossings in one lifetime. At sea, the captain knows the crossing, knows what his boat can do, knows the weather. Even with no other ship alongside, he reads the conditions, borrows a side wind, and takes a following wind. When the wind turns, he knows he can row and steer the last 2 or 3 ri into harbor, which is only a few miles. That is how he handles the boat and crosses. Take that spirit into your life. When something great is at stake, hold in your mind that you are crossing the ford. In strategy, it matters that you cross the ford in the middle of the fight. Read the enemy's strength, know your own skill, and cross by the principle of the way, exactly as a good captain crosses the sea. Once you are across, you can breathe again. Crossing the ford means putting the enemy at a disadvantage and yourself at an advantage, and by then you have usually won already. This matters in strategy on any scale. Examine it well. Reading the state of things. Reading the state of things means this. In strategy on the large scale, you judge whether the enemy is rising or falling. You read the mind of his force. You read the ground and look carefully at the state he is in. Then, you work out how to move your own men, so that the principles of strategy will surely win. You see the shape of what is coming, and you fight from there. In single combat too, you work out the enemy's school and look at what kind of man he is. You find his strong points and his weak points. You do something he does not expect. You read the rise and fall of his condition and the rhythm of the intervals, and you take the initiative. That is what matters, if your own judgment is strong. The state of anything will always be visible to you. Once you can move freely in strategy, you can weigh the enemy's mind well, and you find many ways to win. Give this some thought. Treading on the sword. Treading on the sword is a technique used constantly in strategy. On the large scale first, with bows and guns. When the enemy is shooting and starting his attack, he tends to loose the volley and then come on. If you are stringing another arrow or loading powder, you will find it hard to get in among them. Go in fast while he is still shooting. If you are fast, he cannot fit the arrow, and he cannot fire the gun. Whatever the enemy starts, take the advantage that his own move creates, tread on what he is doing, and win. In single combat too, if you strike after the enemy's sword, you fall into a tapping rhythm and get nowhere. Tread on his blade as it comes, as though you were putting your foot on it. Strike him as he strikes, and make sure he cannot strike a second time. Treading is not only with the foot. Tread with the body, tread with the mind, and of course tread with the sword, so that the enemy never gets a second blow. This is what it means to be first in everything. It does not mean colliding with him. It means going with him and staying on him. Examine this well. Knowing collapse. Everything collapses. A house collapses, a man collapses, an enemy collapses. And it happens at the moment when his rhythm goes wrong. In strategy on the large scale, it matters that you catch the rhythm of the enemy's collapse and drive him without letting the moment escape. If you let his breathing recover, he will find somewhere to rebuild. In single combat too, the enemy's rhythm slips in the middle of the fight, and a break opens in him. If you let your attention drop there, he recovers, comes back with fresh spirit, and you get nowhere. Get into the break and chase him hard so that he cannot lift his head again. Chasing means going straight in with a strong spirit. You cut him loose so that he cannot recover. Understand what cutting loose means. If you do not break him off, he will drag on afterwards. Think about this. Becoming the enemy. Becoming the enemy means putting yourself in his place and thinking from there. Look at the world. A thief who has barricaded himself in a house is thought of as a strong enemy. But become him, and you see that he has the whole world against him, that he has run in there, and that he has nowhere to go. The man barricaded inside is the pheasant. The man going in to finish him is the hawk. Think about that. On the large scale, men make the enemy out to be strong and go at him carefully. If you have a good force, you know the principles of strategy well, and you understand how to beat him, then there is nothing to worry about. In single combat, too, put yourself in the enemy's place. When a man faces someone who understands strategy, whose principles are strong, and who is a master of the way, that man is certain he is going to lose. Examine this well. Letting go of four hands. Letting go of four hands means this. When you and the enemy are locked in the same spirit, pulling against each other, the fight goes nowhere. The moment you feel it turning into a deadlock, drop that condition at once and find another advantage to win with. On the large scale, in strategy, a deadlock gets you nowhere and costs you men. Drop it quickly and win by something the enemy has not thought of. That is the whole thing. In single combat, too, the moment you feel it becoming a deadlock, change the condition, read the enemy's state, and take the victory by something entirely different. Think about this. Moving the shadow. Moving the shadow is what you do when you cannot rid the enemy's mind. In strategy on the large scale, when you can make nothing of his position, pretend to attack hard and watch what he does. Once you have seen his plan, it is easy to win by something entirely different. In single combat, when the enemy holds his sword behind him or out at his side, make as if to strike suddenly, and he will show his intention in his blade. Once it shows and you can read it, take the advantage, and you can be sure of the win. But if your attention drops, the rhythm goes. Examine this well. Holding down the shadow. Holding down the shadow is what you do when you can see the enemy's intention to attack. In strategy on the large scale, when the enemy is about to make a move, you press down on it. Let him see clearly that you are pressing on exactly that. The strength of it pushes him back and his mind changes. Then you change your own mind, attack out of an empty mind, and win. In single combat, you stop the enemy's rising intention with a rhythm that has the advantage in it, and in the moment it stops, you take the advantage and attack first. Give this some thought. Passing it on. Things pass from one person to another. Sleep passes. A yawn passes. Even a sense of time passes. In strategy on the large scale, when the enemy is restless and clearly in a hurry, take no notice of it at all, and look as unhurried as you can. He will take it from you as though it were his own, his spirit will follow yours, and he will go slack. When you feel it has passed to him, empty your mind. Attack fast and hard, and take the victory. In single combat 2, let your body and your mind go easy. Catch the moment the enemy slackens, and attack first, hard and fast. That is the whole thing. There is something close to this, which is called making the enemy weak. There is the spirit that has gone flat, the spirit that is carried away, and the spirit that has grown weak. Give this some thought. Rattling the enemy. Anything can be rattled. First, there is the mind under pressure. Second, there is the mind facing something impossible. Third, there is the mind meeting something it never expected. Examine these. In strategy on the large scale, rattling the enemy matters. Attack where he does not expect it, so hard that he cannot breathe, and before his mind has settled, take the advantage and the initiative and win. In single combat 2, look easy at first, come on suddenly and hard, and as the enemy's mind starts to shake, give him no time to breathe. Take the advantage there and settle the victory. Examine this well. Frightening the enemy. Anything can frighten a man. Fear comes from what he did not expect. In strategy on the large scale, you do not frighten the enemy with what is in front of him. You frighten him with a sound. You frighten him by making something small look large. You frighten him with a sudden move from the side. That is fear. Ride the rhythm of his fear and take the advantage and win. In single combat 2, frighten him with your body. Frighten him with your sword. Frighten him with your voice. Do what is not in his mind. Take the advantage of his fear and win from there. Examine this well. Getting tangled together. Getting tangled means this. When you and the enemy have come close and are pulling hard against each other, you can see that nothing is happening. You get right in among him and become one tangle with him. While you are tangled, you find the advantage and win. Whether you fight with an army or alone, when the two sides stand apart, the spirits pull against each other, and nothing is settled. Then you tangle yourself with the enemy until the two cannot be told apart. You gain what being inside gives you. You see the chance in there, and you win hard. Examine this well. Striking the corners. Striking the corners means this. When you push against something strong, it is hard to push it straight in. In strategy on the large scale, look at the enemy's force and strike the corner of the part that is pushed out furthest and take the advantage there. As the corner goes, the whole thing starts to go with it. Even while it goes, keep your eye on the corners and take the advantage as they fall. In single combat 2, hurt the corners of the enemy's body. Once his body has weakened even slightly and started to break down, beating him is easy. Study this and learn where the victory is. Confusing the enemy. Confusing the enemy means not letting him hold a steady mind. On the large scale, weigh the enemy's mind on the battlefield and use the intelligence of your strategy to pull his mind here and there. Make him wonder whether it will be this or that, and whether you are slow or fast. Ride the rhythm of his confusion and take the victory for certain. In single combat too, when the moment comes, try one thing after another. Look as if you will strike, look as if you will thrust, make him think you are going to close with him. Catch the first sign of his confusion and win as you please. That is the whole of fighting. Examine this well, the 3 shouts. The 3 shouts are the shout at the beginning, the shout in the middle, and the shout at the end. You divide them into 3. Shouting at the right moment and in the right place is the whole point. A shout is force. We shout at a fire, we shout against the wind and the waves, and the voice shows the strength in a man. In strategy on the large scale, the shout at the start of the battle is as loud and overwhelming as you can make it. The shouting during the fight drops in pitch and comes from low in the body. After the victory, you shout loud and strong behind him. Those are the 3 shouts. In single combat too, to move the enemy, you look as if you will strike and shout from the head, and the sword comes out behind the voice. And when you shout after you have struck him, that is the shout that announces the win. They are called the shout before and the shout after. You never shout loudly at the same moment as the sword. If you shout in the middle of a fight, you drop the voice and put it on the rhythm. Examine this well. Cutting through. Cutting through means this. In strategy on the large scale, when the 2 forces are drawn up and the enemy is strong, you go at one side of him. When you see that side break, you leave it and go at the strong side again. You work across him like a mountain path that turns back on itself. Fighting alone against many men, this is the main thing. You do not go at all of them. When one side runs, you go at the strong side again, riding the enemy's rhythm, left and right, turning back and forth, watching how they look as you go in. Once you have taken hold of how they stand, and you are cutting through them, you go with no thought of stepping back, and you win by strength. The same spirit is needed when you go in close against a strong enemy alone. Cutting through means going through without knowing how to take one step back. Think about this. Crushing. Crushing means this. You treat the enemy as weak. You make yourself strong, and your whole mind is on crushing him. In strategy on the large scale, read the state of the enemy's force. When the men are confused and their spirit is starting to fail, even if there are many of them, come down on them from above with all your weight and crush them. If you crush weakly, they can recover. Learn the feeling of crushing something in your closed hand. In single combat too, the man may be below your level, or his rhythm may have slipped so that he is starting to give ground. Give him no room to breathe. Do not even let him meet your eyes and crush him in one go. Never let him straighten up. That is the first thing. Examine this well. mountain and sea. The spirit of mountain and sea means this. In a fight, it is bad to do the same thing again and again. Doing something twice cannot be helped. Never do it 3 times. When you try something on the enemy and it fails the first time, pressing it a second time will bring you nothing. Do something completely different, suddenly, and if that gets you nowhere, try something else again. So, if the enemy is thinking mountain, give him sea. If he is thinking sea, give him mountain. That is the way of strategy. Examine it well. Knocking out the bottom. Knocking out the bottom means this. Sometimes you beat the enemy on the surface through the principles of the way. But he does not give up in his spirit. If he is beaten on the surface and unbeaten underneath. In that case, you change your own spirit suddenly, break the spirit out of him, and watch until he is beaten all the way to the bottom. That is the whole thing. You knock the bottom out with the sword, and with the body, and with the mind. There is no single way to do it. When the enemy has collapsed from the bottom, you no longer need to keep anything in reserve. When he has not, you keep something back. As long as you are holding something back, he is hard to break. Train hard at knocking out the bottom, whether you fight alone or with an army. Starting fresh. Starting fresh means this. When you and the enemy are tangled and getting nowhere, throw away your own state of mind. Begin the whole thing again as though it were new. Catch that rhythm and take the victory there. Whenever you feel that you and the enemy have started to grind against each other, change your condition at once and win by something completely different. On the large scale too, knowing when to start fresh matters. With the intelligence of strategy, you can see it at once. Examine this well. A rat's head and an ox's neck. A rat's head and an ox's neck means this. When you and the enemy are picking at small details, and the fight has become a tangle, always think of the way of strategy as the rat's head and the ox's neck. In the middle of something very small, become suddenly large. Change from small to large. This is one of the attitudes of strategy. A warrior should think of the ordinary human mind in the same way, as a rat's head and an ox's neck. In strategy on any scale, do not let this go. Examine it well. The general knows his troops. The general knows his troops means this. Wherever you find yourself in a fight, once you have reached the way you were aiming at, keep applying this law. With the intelligence of strategy, treat every enemy who opposes you as one of your own soldiers. Handle him as you please, move him around freely, and understand that you are the general and he is the soldier. Give this some thought. Letting go of the hilt. Letting go of the hilt has several meanings. It means winning without a sword. It also means not winning with the sword. I will not write out everything it can mean. Train hard at it. The body of a rock. The body of a rock means this. Once you have taken the way of strategy into yourself, you become like a rock at once. Nothing strikes you, and nothing moves you. It is passed on by word of mouth. Afterward. What I have written here is only what comes to mind again and again in the practice of my school's swordsmanship. This is the first time I have set these advantages down, so the order runs together in places, and it is hard to say each thing exactly. Even so, it should serve as a mark to steer by for anyone who wants to learn this way. Since my youth, I have given my heart to the way of strategy. I wore out my hands and my body training even at ordinary swordsmanship. I passed through every kind of mind, and I looked into the other schools as well. Some of them talk a good case, and some do fine work with the fingertips and make it look impressive to an audience. But none of it is the real thing. Of course, men who train that way believe they are conditioning the body and disciplining the mind. But all of it becomes a sickness in the way, and it never quite leaves them. And it is the root of why the direct road of strategy is rotting out of the world, and the way is dying. Swordsmanship becoming the true way, and beating your enemy with it, must not differ in the smallest thing from this law. If you take hold of the intelligence of my strategy and follow the straight road, there is no doubt that you will win. The Book of Wind. Knowing the ways of other schools. I have written down the strategy of the other schools and set it out here as the Book of Wind. Without knowing the ways of others, you cannot properly understand your own. Looking into the other schools, some take a large sword and make strength their whole concern. Some work with the short sword. Some invent a great number of sword techniques and teach their stances as the surface and the depth of the way. I will show clearly, later in this scroll, that none of that is the true way, and make plain what is sound in it and what is not. The principle of my school is something else entirely. The other schools have turned into performance. They have become a way of making a living, decorated and brought into flower and dressed up for sale. Surely that is not the true way. The strategy of the world also makes itself small by treating everything as swordsmanship. Men practice swinging the sword, condition the body, and train until their hands are worn out, and they think that is how you win. None of it is a sure road. I will set out the weaknesses of the other schools one by one. I'd examine them carefully and understand the advantage of the two-sword school. Other schools that prefer a long sword. Some schools prefer a long sword. From the point of view of my strategy, I see them as weak schools. Here is why. They do not understand the principle of beating a man, whatever it takes. They treat the length of the blade as a virtue and want to win from far off. And that is why they like a long sword. There is a saying in the world that an inch of reach is an inch of advantage, but it is the talk of men who know nothing of strategy. To try to win from a distance because of length, with no understanding of strategy, comes from weakness of spirit. That is why I call it weak strategy. If the enemy is close and you are grappling, the longer the sword, the harder it is to strike with, the less room you have to swing, and the sword becomes so much luggage. You are worse off than a man with a short blade or with empty hands. A man who prefers the long sword will have his reasons, but they are his reasons and no one else's. Seen from the true way of the world, they make no sense. Are you certain to lose if you fight with a short sword instead of a long one? What about the places where you are closed in above, or below, or at the side, or a room where men carry only the short sword? Clinging to length in those places is what I call doubt in strategy, and it is a bad frame of mind. Some men are not strong. Some men cannot wear a long sword at all. It has been said for a long time that the greater contains the lesser. And I am not saying that length itself is wrong. I am against the mind that leans towards length. On the large scale, the long sword is a large force, and the short sword is a small one. Can a small force not fight a large one? There are many cases of a small force beating a large one. My school dislikes any narrow leaning of this kind. But examine it well. The strong sword in other schools. There is no such thing as a strong sword and a weak sword. A sword swung with a strong spirit is a rough sword, and roughness alone will not win. If you try to cut a man down by force, using what they call the strong sword, you will not cut him. Even cutting a practice target, trying to cut hard is a mistake. No one crossing swords with an enemy thinks about cutting weakly or cutting strongly. When you mean to cut a man down, there is no strong spirit in it, and certainly no weak one. There is only the thought that he should die. If you beat the enemy's blade aside with a strong sword, you overdo it, and it always goes badly. Strike his blade hard enough, and your own blade breaks. So there is no such thing as a strong sword. On the large scale, it is the same. If you have a strong force and mean to win by force, the enemy will bring strong men too and mean to fight by force. It is the same on both sides. Winning is the point in everything, but you cannot win against reason. In my way, you never think of forcing anything. You use the intelligence of strategy and find a way to win whatever the situation. Give this some thought. Other schools that use a short sword. Thinking you will win with a short sword alone is not the true way. Since ancient times, we have said sword and blade, meaning the long and the short. Strong men swing even a large sword lightly, so they have no reason to insist on something short. They also carry the spear and the halberd to make use of length. To take a short sword and think of cutting into a gap in the enemy's swing, or jumping into it, or grabbing him, is a narrow and bad frame of mind. Watching for gaps makes you late in everything and gets you tangled up, and I dislike it. Going in with something short to grapple with the enemy or to seize him is useless in a crowd. A man who has mastered the short sword may think he will cut through a crowd, or leap about freely, or run wild, but all of it turns into taking blows on the blade, and he ends up caught up in it. It is not a sure road. All things being equal, keep your own body strong and straight, drive the enemy about, make him leap around, make him lose his footing, and win for certain. That is the way. The same principle holds on the large scale. All things being equal, take a large force, drive the enemy into the ground, where your arrows fall, and crush him at once. That is the whole of strategy. When men train at receiving and dodging, and slipping past, and ducking under, their minds get dragged along by it, and they end up being pushed around. The way of strategy is straight and correct, so it matters that you drive men before you and make them follow you, and that you do it by a sound principle. Examine this well. Other schools with many sword techniques. Teaching men a great number of sword techniques must be a way of dressing the way up for sale, of impressing beginners with how many things you know. In strategy, I dislike that frame of mind. Here is why. Thinking that there are many different ways to cut a man down is a confused mind. There is no other way to cut a man. Whether you know anything or nothing, whether you are a woman or a child, there are not many ways to strike and cut someone down. If there is anything besides cutting, it is the thrust and the sweep, and nothing more. Since it is essentially cutting, there is no reason for a great number of techniques. Even so, according to the ground and the way things run, there are places closed in above or at the side where you must hold the sword so that it does not catch. That is why there are the five stances. Beyond those, twisting the hands, turning the body, jumping and dodging in order to cut a man down is not the true way. You cannot cut by twisting, or by turning, or by jumping, or by dodging. All of it is useless. In my strategy, you keep the body straight and the mind straight, and you win by making the enemy bend and twist, and by taking him at the moment when his mind is bent out of shape. Examine this well. Other schools that rely on stances. Making the stance the whole point is a mistake. Taking a stance in the world is something you do when there is no enemy in front of you. Here is why. It is impossible to set up fixed rules and precedents in a contest, either from old custom or from the practice of our own day. You have to make things go badly for the man in front of you. A stance is something you take when you want to hold a position that will not be shaken. You hold a castle, you hold a battle line. You mean to stand firm even when you are attacked. That is the ordinary sense of it. In a contest of strategy, everything depends on taking the initiative. Taking a stance means waiting for the other man to take it. Give this some thought. In a contest, you move the other man's stance. You do what he does not expect. You confuse him. You rattle him. You frighten him. And you win by taking the rhythm at the moment he is thrown. That is why I dislike the following spirit of the stance. So in my way we speak of stance and no stance. There is a stance, and there is no stance. On the large scale as well, you count the enemy's numbers. You read the ground. You know the state of your own force. You take what the ground gives you. You draw up your men and begin the fight. That is the whole of battle. Being attacked first and attacking first are twice as different as they sound. Holding your sword in a fine stance, watching the enemy's blade carefully, and meaning to parry it well, is like standing behind a fence and swinging a spear through it. When you strike the enemy, you should be ready to pull up the fence posts and use them as your spear. Examine this well. The gaze in other schools. Some schools fix the gaze on the enemy's sword, some on his hands, some on his face, some on his feet. Fixing on any one thing that way brings on confusion, and it becomes what I call a sickness in strategy. Here is why. A man kicking a ball does not look hard at the ball, and yet he can kick it off his hairline, keep it up, and kick it all around. He is used to it, so he does not need to look at it closely. A street performer who has grown used to his trade can balance a door on his nose and juggle several swords. He is not staring hard at any of it either. He handles these things all the time, so he sees them naturally. It is the same in the way of strategy. Once you have fought this enemy and that one, and learned the weight of a man's spirit, and lived in the way until it is yours, you can see everything, including how near and how fast the sword is. The gaze in strategy is fixed mostly on the enemy's mind. On the large scale, it is fixed on the state of his force. Of the two kinds of seeing, perceiving and looking, the perceiving eye is the strong one. You see the enemy's mind. You see the ground. You look widely. You see how the fight stands. You see the strength and weakness of the moment. And you take the victory as it is. That is the whole thing. In strategy on any scale, you never fix the gaze on something small. As I said before, if you fix on fine details, you forget the large things. Confusion comes over you, and you let a certain victory slip. But examine this advantage and train at it. Footwork in other schools. Other schools have all kinds of quick footwork. There is the floating foot, the jumping foot, the springing foot, the stamping foot, the crow foot, and others. From the point of view of my strategy, all of these are weaknesses. I dislike the floating foot. In a fight, the feet always tend to float. So it matters that you tread as firmly as you can. I do not like the jumping foot either. A jump has a gathering before it, and a moment after it where you are stuck. There is no sense in jumping again and again, so the jumping foot is bad. The springing foot puts your mind on springing, and that gets you nowhere. The stamping foot is a waiting foot, and I dislike it most of all. Besides these, there is the crow foot and other kinds of quick step. You may have to fight in a marsh, in a wet field, on a mountain, in a river, on stones, or on a narrow path. In some of those places, you cannot jump about at all. In others, you cannot use quick footwork. In my strategy, the feet do not change. They walk as they walk along an ordinary road. You follow the enemy's rhythm. You take the posture the moment needs, whether it is hurried or calm. And your step is neither short nor long, and never unsteady. Moving the feet matters on the large scale too. If you do not know the enemy's mind, and you rush in, your rhythm breaks, and you will not win. If your step is too slow, you will not see the moment when the enemy is thrown and starts to break. You will let the victory pass, and you will not finish quickly. You have to see where he is thrown and breaking, and win without giving him a moment of ease. Train hard at this. Other schools that rely on speed. Speed in strategy is not the true way. Speed means being out of step with the rhythm of the thing, which is why we speak of fast and slow at all. A man who is good at his way never looks fast. Take a courier who covers 40 or 50 ri in a day, more than 100 miles. He is not running fast from morning to night. A man who is no good at the road may look as though he is running all day and cover nothing. In singing, if a poor singer follows a good one, he falls behind and starts to hurry. In drumming, when the piece is a slow one, a poor player still falls behind and starts to rush. When the piece is a quick one, playing it fast is wrong. There is a saying that fast trips over itself and fails to arrive. Slow is bad too, of course. What a good man does looks unhurried and never leaves a gap in the beat. Whatever a practiced man does never looks busy. Use this comparison to understand the principle of the way. Speed is especially bad in the way of strategy. Here is why. In a marsh or a wet field, the body and the feet cannot move fast at all. And the faster you try to cut with the sword, the less it cuts. You cannot handle it like a fan or a small knife. Slash quickly, and you will not cut at all. Think this through. On the large scale, hurrying is bad. If you have the spirit of holding down the pillow, you will never be too slow. When a man is being needlessly fast, you go against him. You become calm and refuse to be drawn to his pace. That is what matters. Train your mind at this, surface and depth in other schools. In strategy, what is the surface and what is the depth? In some arts, when the moment comes, they speak of the innermost teaching and the secret transmission, and they have an entrance and a deep interior. But when it comes to the principles of fighting a man, you do not fight with the surface and cut with the depth. This is how I teach. For a man who is beginning the way, I give him the things his skill can already manage. I teach him first the principles he will grasp quickly. What he cannot understand yet, I leave until I can see where he has found a thread to hold, and then, step by step, I teach the deeper principles later. Even so, most of what I teach has to do with real situations. So there is no such thing as an inside and an entrance. Think of walking into the mountains. If you decide to go deeper, you come out at the entrance again. In any way, sometimes the deep thing is what serves, and sometimes it is right to bring out what lies at the entrance. In the principles of fighting, what would I hide and what would I show? So when I hand on this way, I do not care for written oaths and penalties. I look at the intelligence of the man who is learning, and I teach him the straight road. I have him throw off the bad parts of 5 or 6 kinds of strategy. I bring him naturally into the true way of the warrior's law, with no doubt in his mind. That is how I teach strategy. Train hard. Afterward, I have set out the strategy of the other schools, here in 9 articles, as the Book of Wind. I could have written each school out in detail, from its entrance to its depths, but I have deliberately not named which school or which teaching. Here is why. The view of each school and the reading of each way depends on the man and on his mind, and every man has his own opinion. So even within one school things differ a little. I have not written down the name of a school or a line for the sake of the years ahead. I have divided the other schools roughly into 9. Seen by the way of the world, and by ordinary straight reasoning, leaning towards length, or making a virtue of shortness, or leaning towards strength or weakness, or towards the rough or the fine, are all of them leanings. So, even without saying which is the entrance and which the depth of another school, everyone can see it for himself. In my school there is no surface and no depth to the sword, and there is no final form to the stance. There is only knowing its virtue with your own mind. That is the heart of strategy. The Book of Void. I set down the way of strategy of the 2 swords school here as the Book of Void. What the void means is this: where a thing does not exist, or where it cannot be known, we see the void. Of course, the void is nothing at all. You know what is there, and you know what is not there. That is the void. In the world, people take a low view of it and call it the void when a man does not understand something. That is not the real void. It is only confusion. In this way of strategy, too, when a man follows the way as a warrior and does not know the law of the warrior, people call it the void. It is not the void. It is a mass of confusion that he cannot help. That is not the real void either. A warrior learns the way of strategy for certain, and he works hard at the other martial arts. He is never in the dark about the way he walks. His mind is never lost. He does not slacken, hour by hour and day by day. He polishes the 2 minds of intention and judgment, and he sharpens the 2 eyes of perceiving and looking. When there is not the smallest cloud left, and the fog of confusion has cleared, that is the real void. Know it as that. Until a man knows the true way, whether he leans on Buddhist teaching or on the law of the world, he believes his own road is a sure one and a good one. But measure it by the straight road of the mind, and set it against the great standard of the world. Every man is pulled aside by what his own heart favors, and by the bend in his own eye, and so he goes against the true way. Know that. Take what is straight as your foundation. Make the true mind your way. Practice strategy widely. Keep what is correct and clear and large in your mind. And take the void as your way, and your way as the void. In the void there is good and no evil. Wisdom exists. Advantage exists. The way exists. The mind is void. The 12th day of the 5th month, the 2nd year of Shouho, Shinmen Musashi, Totero Maganojo. The 5th day of the 2nd month, the 7th year of Kanbun. Terao Yumio Katsunobu, to Yamamoto Gensuke.
That was The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi in a new English translation made for this channel. Thank you for staying with it to the end. I asked you to listen for the Book of Wen, where he takes apart every other school of the sword that came before him. Tell me in the comments whether you think he had the right to do that and which part of the book stayed with you.